So it works on paper, paper's materiality, utilizing different materials. A video I just posted and learning about other artists, history, what inspired them. It's always interesting about other people's experiences, and probably why I just document daily life, things I've made that day and whatnot. It all contributes overall practice, different projects and what they entail and what they require, the focus on them. If you know how to do one thing, practicing something else, like the jump video. Animation was the point, so I needed to create material to work with. Took photos of my downstairs neighbor and outlined blueprints of them as per the concept. As he walks into the blueprint of his plan and jumps into this concept of jumping into reality, or jumping into a new phase of life, or jumping into an opportunity, or on a spiritual level, jumping into the world. In human form, something like Jesus. Yeah. Each series, each project requires different things, so I always teach myself, then going back to that and expanding on those skills or that learned. It's like elemental. Experimenting with just different colors, different materials, and even playlists are painting. Video use like a tube of paint, basically, that takes on different form, meaning, substance, intent in a painting, various paintings, canvases, qualities, characteristics. If it looks different next to a different color. Passing a red. It was a weird intersection. It was like a six-way intersection or something. It was like red light, and I was going through. And the other way was the green light, and it was yellow at the same time. So like almost like optical art, or how when you put red and green together, your eye sees yellow. And it said yellow as I went through it. So yeah, just how video or all of its component parts can be highlighted in different ways throughout different playlists, or in different canvases, different timelines, different paintings. And he took soup cans and made them iconic. Something as mundane as playlists that anyone can make. I gave meaning. So what's necessary? How the artists have put it all together, the connections that were inspired by the artists and lived experiences. And all of this just contributes, all these things I do outside of my digital studio and here, and just plays into it all. So just self-regulate all of it. Yeah. So that's how some of those videos that I'll put up will kind of overlap or relate to what I'm doing at the time, working on paper, paper's materiality, and yeah. But what happens in my life happens in my life, and it's not a mirror. So anything else would be contrived, and I'm all about the organic and natural timing and all of the experiments that rely on being objective and not contriving problems to mirror or anything of the sort. So when people took what was forecasting, fashion forecasting, and that was only a part of my Value of Ideas project, and something I studied and based my alchemical stuff on, cycle on, and just pulling all that knowledge together. Well, that was mainly oriented into my Value of Ideas project, the alchemical cycle, and just reinventing fashion forecasting. And yeah, was adopted by WGSN, my methodology. So the thing is, like, with making predictions, people start to expect them for free and start to expect that I live my life in the future, basically, and for their benefit only, and without, and with, I just don't think anyone's entitled to know the future, and I've talked about this before, and considering they, like, scapegoat me and wanted warnings, but then said it was a wish list, I don't make predictions anymore, especially on a broad scale for the public in any capacity, as I've stated many times on record. So if anyone ever wants to work with me, they need to work with me directly and not with someone else, or not through a liaison, quote unquote, or someone who's just going to my channel to try to elicit information out of what is a context just completely irrelevant, or not. What I said at the beginning was tarot videos. You could try to see how they apply as they're abroad in your particular industry and whatnot. And of course, with music, everyone relates to these things, but I had a very specific reason for why I put things in. That's the parameters and whatnot of my art practice, and why I put it all together is the point. It's a perspective, it's a concept, it's the reason for making it. Anything taken out of that and out of context detracts from that in a way, especially if in a sense of overriding or negating what the original purpose was for a playlist or for a project or for a video or something like that. So with all due respect, please keep your interpretations and things of that nature as such, and kindly give credit where credit is due, as I never ever stated that I was ever putting time, effort, work in to give someone else credit for my work and perspective in any capacity in order to post on my behalf. I don't know why anyone has ever had access to my phone, and I don't know any artist that has to deal with the kind of stress of other people having access to their private phone, intellectual property, projects, works, and posting it as though it was theirs, and then accusing the artists of plagiarizing themselves. It's not a game. And if you don't know the reasons why I've done certain projects or things in the past, then I encourage you to ask me if you really want to know. But otherwise, you can find your own methodologies and systems and all that kind of thing that works for you people, but separate from me, because I don't mirror nor reflect other people as I'm talking about concepts and working out my own experiences that built upon that, and memories and artistic development projects, things I put into these projects, reasons for making them in the first place, and then where I was in life at that time, and looking at it all as an anthropological study of one's own life, in a sense, and how it relates to the larger world also on all these levels in the alchemical cycle, and pulling it all together and tracking trends and just all of it. So please, I very much encourage and would impress upon people to, if they're going to have their interpretations, to state it as such and not as fact, or as in place of the artist who conceived of this entire thing, all of it. Everything from the jump and previous series and illustration series and collaborations to my value of ideas, theory of everything, data plays, and everything therein. After that, and every playlist, and even the shuffle playlists, which were pulled from my curated playlists, that had a system to that as well, and incorporated videos that often were inspired or very much related to, intrinsically related to what I was creating on every level in a concept form, where I also stated if anyone didn't want that to be involved, or their work to be involved in what I was doing, to just let me know, and I wouldn't. So, as far as videos go, I always thought that, parts spoke for themselves. That playlist is right there in the playlist, or that video is right there in the playlist. It's not negating the artists who made it, even if they didn't give me credit for certain things or whatnot, or say specifically that was a code from what I was doing or whatnot. But in any case, it doesn't have one meaning only, although they might have their intention for it. In using it, there's not one meaning. And incorporating it and bringing it into this whole project doesn't have just one meaning, as there's multiple reasons why I chose every video, and that plays into my fifth house and all the different planetary expressions and stellium therein, and just pretty much everything. there's just all these things that relate on very personal, intrinsic levels that are difficult to have people appreciate, or to share with people and have them appreciate, because there's so much lead up, and then it comes off as over explaining. But if I don't pretty much just like say, and then this happened, and it's from this strange episode or this or that, and you wouldn't really get the gist of why. There's some reason to note it or circle back to it or tie it into everything that I'm talking about or noting. And even though it's not all on my channel, it's one of my intersection words being, she really does share as much as she possibly can, or something like that. So if there's, or something to that effect, or explain as much as she can, or demonstrate as much, yeah. So that people are more or less aware of the reasons why I do these things and what comes about and comes out of that, and how it all ties together, and so that we have a greater, deeper appreciation for art as a whole, especially from perhaps the perspective of people who haven't studied it, but in the end, it's my digital studio. It's documenting my art, practice, residency, projects, progress, and when I was making predictions and tracking that and confirming those, which helped a lot in knowing I wasn't, crazy, and that there was some legitimacy to the things that I was picking up on and noting and tracking. And but again, with all these things that become somewhat, people pick up on them, people start to contrive problems or whatnot in order to mirror them, and then it becomes blurry and vague. And so I just took a big whole pause, stop, break from all of those things, because that's just not going to help anyone in any experimental sense either, especially if you're manipulating the element, what goes into an experiment, or what goes into noting a whole. These things are all so entangled and entwined and just connected, so it's, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. I try to be as natural and organic with things as possible, as far as not trying to make something happen, or especially even timing, because otherwise there's just not much point to doing it. There's no experimental reason for it. You're not getting legitimate information out of it if you don't know for sure that it's any legitimacy to it. And part of the reason why was knowing what parts of songs and whatnot applied to me, that was helpful in going through an intersection. But yeah, there's just a million reasons for doing everything, so it would be kind of insulting for anyone to diminish with the time and effort and thought I put into something down to one-dimensional way of thinking, and then to negate that I had anything to do with it, or to think that I'm plagiarizing my own thoughts, or to pretend in some sci-fi dimensional delusional reality that someone else would think for me, is just beyond inappropriate and completely antithesis of a conceptual linguistic-based art practice that's self-regulated and about self-expression and out of one's own experiences. And well, if you haven't had any with me, then you more or less might be irrelevant in my own personal life, but I would hope that you would appreciate some of the connections and connect in other ways, and maybe even reach out and want to collaborate if you're an artist or a designer or creative, or even just open up in dialogue and original done digital salon, like 1700s, or factory, or Andy Warhol had all of his friends around and just created and made art, like Just Kids and Patti Smith and all of her artist friends in New York. Then just there's no barriers to what they felt like they could create. It seemed like they didn't hold themselves back because they didn't major in a certain study, or they weren't experts in something or other. They just made and they created and talked about playwriting, and then putting it on play in East Village, and then putting that money into some sort of, like, well, I guess today would be like a startup or something. But it was just interesting how they all worked together and how they didn't let those things hold them back, and they didn't let other people's opinions hold them back. And I just really always appreciated that, and would hope that people that visit my YouTube channel would also be like-minded in that sense, and free will, and all things that I've stood for from the beginning, like liberation, and freedom of the mind, and freedom of expression, and freedom of speech, and freedom to be oneself, and freedom to go where one pleases, and freedom to pursue one's dreams, and live life to the fullest, and freedom to just be free of people's put upon expectations and things of that nature. A certain way of living or being or going about things, especially as an artist when you're self-regulated and there's not an exact blueprint, even if you try to make one for yourself. There's always those happy accidents and things that come about along the way that help you to guide and redirect in one's own edit and all these different types of creative terminology, but can apply in life as well, as we edit our life path, as we maneuver around obstacles, as we take on new opportunities or adventures, all these kinds of cliche things, but I sort of always look at everything as a sort of creative project or endeavor, and right now, time to review, time to edit, time to maybe bring in some new elements or try something else, come back to that, circle back. But overall, you can see how these things remain consistent within my art practice, and I'd hope that in sharing videos I find inspiring or that are relatable in certain ways to what it is I'm doing at that moment or interested in or thinking about, that there would be these conversations and sparks that open up and begin, and for myself and for other people and also collectively and whatnot. So yeah, in daylight, just more to appreciate sometimes. And again, straightforward, upright. That was just one placement of my birth chart in translation between mythology and the runic language and Odin and just all kinds of parallels I found. And actually, it's just, if you were to go back to the Imona video, and the question I asked, what is forgiveness? And the book I held up at the time was Poetics of Space. So poetry and poetic. I felt like that the placements in my chart sort of reiterated that in some ways, parallels to spirituality and whatnot, and in language and in a cliffhanger. The rest is still unwritten. So you would think that my birth chart was made up, but it's not. It's my real birthday, November 26, 1985, 8:03 p.m. Tuesday, full moon, just like you are. And you have a sun moon opposite. It's a little tidbit of information. But yeah, I just found all that really interesting and just was kind of teaching myself about it as I went. So sharing what I learned. I hope that people would share with me also their insights, knowledge, and points of view, and comments and whatnot. And yeah, if you feel up to it or feel like getting creative or some sort of art therapy, to look at my participation, one that I invite people to participate in driving past here, but I also did other places, like sitting at certain other locations, station areas. There was sun, and it would be different if you were, on certain locations, I guess, as a moon. But yeah, and those times and whatnot that I noted in the card type color with the word, and so that people were able to take note at the time when they drove by and match it up and see if it applies to them on some level, and see what other words surrounding that might speak to them, and make your own little art therapy haiku if you feel like it. And invite people to participate in that sense, and within parameters, and in the philosophy of art as experience, which is out of John Dewey's philosophy and founder of my school, so that I went to. So those are just examples of how I tried to make it so there was no confusion about how I related to things, but at the same time without always making me the center of just sharing tidbits of my life and how we make life artistic as artists, as creatives. Bring beauty into the everyday. Those are just some thoughts on things I've been thinking about lately and just all the misconstrued or misinterpretations that people have come up with and what I guess people have been told by someone other than me, which is kind of also, again, the antithesis of what having a voice within one's own art practice is about. But, yeah, so, but again, talking about future and moving past all these things, so, straightforward. Hopefully you don't have to say that anymore. 21:45. Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments or suggestions or insights or information you want to share or collaborations on anything.